Costa. I just want to ask about the defence spending, which I think Hannah already covered.
Can we have some quiet, please?
Yeah, so my understanding it's 2% of GDP now that our government's agreed to permanently give to the military under pressure from the United States. And it was Julia Gillard, the Labor government, that agreed to it, and it's got bipartisan support. But I'm not sure what the policy of the Greens is. But given that there's bipartisan support and we're spending 2% on military, that obviously supports the US imperialist war effort, because we take some of the load for that, but also supports the US economy, because a lot of the military spending is on US planes and whatever. So we're a bit suckers both ways on that. But the reason I'm raising it is because in the Herald, in the Telegraph, which many of you probably don't read, they're now saying that some of this money, because defence is obviously rolling in money, because that money can't be touched, it's enduring, they're not allowed to cut it in the budget, it's taken out of the budget review, and they've got so much money now, they're using it to spy on our social media. So just in case people didn't see that. But the reason I'm raising it to ask the question is about my health record, which I don't know how many people have opted out. Has anyone opted out yet? Yeah. My health record is going to be a huge database. It's going to suck up all your PBS, your tablets, whatever medications you've been prescribed, all your MBS items, whatever you see the doctor for, mental health plans, whatever, including, and it'll be open to all health providers. Yeah. Oh, you got one.
Same one.
Oh, you got one. Yeah. Today, tell you.
Now it's a very shonky arrangement, because although it's good to share your data amongst all your health professionals, it was opt-in, and that was for chronic severe conditions. You could opt in. Now they're going to suck everyone up, unless you tell them not to. By the way, although the internet is in 20 languages, the telephone hotline's only in English. And they're saying, but it doesn't matter because you're going to control it. All you people are going to control this privacy. So the doctor's not going to control it anymore. We've got to put it all up there, and you've got to control it. So you've got to go into the internet every week and block and delete what you don't want seen by anybody. I'm just raising this because the question, I guess, is, given what they're doing already, it makes you fairly paranoid that this information is going to go far and wide. And the question is, how much protest is happening about my health record? Or is it just me that's being paranoid because I'm a doctor and I'm concerned about your confidentiality now being thrown out there?
My doctor told me to not go on it.
Yeah, I understand opting out is what you should do, but I reckon 60% of Australians don't have the ability, for various reasons, to use a computer on a regular basis every week to control their record, or even to opt out. So, yes, we can opt out, but is there a movement or people now? I know there's a Senate inquiry just winding up, but as far as I know, it's in motion. November the 15th, we're all sucked in. So, is anyone aware of any movement or concern happening? That's the real concern to me. It's not that they're doing it, not that they've got the balls to do it, but we don't seem to have the balls to protest against it. And that's why I'm asking the question, is it happening or isn't it?
You started, Dr. Con Costa. You're the Doctors Reform Society. We'll follow your lead.
Okay, that's why I'm just asking for information if people know of any movement happening or people that are working.
You might find Dr. Arthur Chesterfield Evans would want to join you as well.
Okay. All right, that was my question.
Con, I think you've raised something very significant, but it's an area where I don't have much sort of involvement, and I don't know of any large movement or any movement against the new system. So I can't add anything to the very interesting stuff you said. Just wanted to make one point. At the moment, we're spending 1.9% of GDP. We will reach the 2%, as Trump has told us to, in 2021. But that's already 3 years earlier than originally anticipated. So we're being good boys and girls.
Next question.
Next question.
Thank you for your talk. Your comment on this contradiction that I find. We have a government committed to a market fundamentalist, laissez-faire, austerity economics, austerity when it comes to social spending, and yet the government will establish a $3 billion loan scheme for private defence companies seeking finance to sell weapons and equipment to other countries. And Christopher Pyne, the Defence Minister, criticised the banks for being too risk-averse, saying that the government would need to step in and provide credit when companies needed help to boost exports. Quote from Christopher Pyne: "There are certain characteristics of the defence industry, particularly in markets like the Middle East and Asia, where banks are not as enthusiastic as they should be to have loan facilities. Sometimes banks won't even go near such an industry, whereas there's no reason why government can't provide the finance." So we've also cut the aid budget as well, foreign aid budget significantly. We're exporting arms, creating to volatile regions. That will create turmoil, and on top of that we persecute people fleeing and seeking sanctuary. How do you square those contradictions?
The last speech. Why do you listen to business?
Yeah, it's certainly a point well made, and it's a huge contradiction. On the one hand, those who talk about low government spending and minimal interference by governments in the market, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to weapons, they're all for huge weapon spending, and seems to be a matter of the sky's the limit. So there's a lot of ideology there and no common sense. And these are not policies for the common good. They're policies for those who are wealthy, making more wealth.
I think Sue hit it on the head. These are policies for vested interests who are making profits. They're not policies for the common good. And unfortunately, I think to a large extent, our main political parties are not concerned about the common good. They do not listen to the people. You know, Con asked about a movement about the health records. Well, you know, they're building WestConnect. And there was a movement about that, and they're still building it. So we're facing a situation in which they put all kinds of spin on these situations. They spend money in a way that is ideological, rather than for the benefit and development sustainably and peacefully of Australia.
Next question.
Thank you. My name is Ken Cregan. Wonderful talk, very important. And I must admit some disillusionment as you say that you try to set up these movements and they're doomed to failure. But I was interested in the talk where you talked about fueling war, and especially where you put all this money into war weapons, and it looks like it will be inevitable that's going to end up with the war coming back on you. And so I was wondering what your thoughts would be on a movement wherein you would try to lobby Parliament for a policy wherein a proportion of the defence spending goes towards spending on goods and services with your possible enemy, so that a country like Australia, say it was Australia versus Russia, that a certain percentage, let's say half of all that money spent on defence was actually spent in Russia. And likewise, under a mutual agreement, Russia spends half of their defence in Australia, so that if they have war on Australia, they're ruining half their economy, and likewise for us. So it's to try and find a way to defuel war by breaking this nexus between spending of money and the war machine.
I think we both think it's a very good idea.
Yes, thank you, Ken. I mean, anything that that promotes links, trading links, cultural links, all sorts of other links between countries is a good thing. And I guess that's one of the reasons that that there's so much concern about the possibility of war with China is that we depend on China so much for trade. So and that's a good thing, that interconnectedness. So yeah, I think any economic or other links with nations are generally a good thing.
No, I agree too.
Hi, I'm Arya. The world's tension is getting higher and higher, and arms race mounting. You come across any information about a weapon in the space? I would like to know.
Weapons in space?
Yeah, weapon in space.
We are facing a situation in which there are international treaties which ban the use of weapons in space, which are being ignored primarily by the United States, which is driving ahead. And the direction, not just of Trump, but also of Obama and Bush, is quite clear. Their statements make it clear that the United States intends to dominate space. The Japanese just did a fantastic job and landed on an asteroid. Why are we interested in asteroids? Because one of the things that's happening is that space exploration is being commercialized because you can mine asteroids. So we have an impetus to put up more satellites, to send more vehicles into space. And with this goes the United States saying, yeah, and we're going to run the lot. And the film we've announced is actually about a new decision. They are going to set up what they're calling a Space Force. It is a new wing of the American military, and it will be dedicated to the control of space by the United States, primarily militarily, but also to protect investments. It's the same pattern we've seen in many countries, where American military intervention is about protecting their conglomerates who are, using resources, cheap labour, whatever. And they're just about to replicate it in some strength in space.
Thanks.
My name's Caroline Turner, and I'm really impressed by the clarity of the and information of the first speaker. I think privacy has gone. We don't have any privacy. You cannot guarantee it. So, yeah, I think that's just what it is now.
I know what's in your garbage bin.
There is also, with huge financial control networks, investment. I'm sure a lot of us with our superannuation funds, if any, and bank interest on savings account and investment generally, a lot of it's quite highly secret. It's highly secretive, and I'm sure a lot of it's going into armaments and WestConnect, and we wouldn't be told. Okay.
Well, first of all, there's a charming thing called commercial incompetence. Which means if it's to do with business and they don't want us to know, they don't tell us.
Oh, they can always make an excuse and make it legal.
Well, no, they just don't tell us. You know, you put in an FOI request about something, and very often you get knocked back because it's commercial in confidence. Now, I mean, the size of the armaments conglomerates like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and the kind of profits they have mean that they don't have to worry about that too much because they buy what they want. They can buy prime ministers, they can buy countries in effect. So, of course they lie. You know, every now and then in the United States, Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or one of the others has been found out in doing something quite outrageous. And there's been an inquiry and they've had a slap on the wrist and been fined a few million.
Of course.
But their power is so extreme that secrecy isn't really a problem for them. They buy it. But you mentioned superannuation and it jogged my memory. Dennis and I were driving somewhere and we passed this huge billboard which says, do you know, or I think it's something like this, do you know if your superannuation fund invests in coal or weapons? And I don't know, we were gone by the time I'd read it quickly. I don't know who produced it, but I'd like to find out because I think that is an important campaign. Superannuation is a very large amount of money and there should be more transparency about where they are investing.
Yeah, there's a lot of shoulds, but would it happen?
Depends on how stroppy everybody gets in this country. I mean, we tend to be very respectful. John Pilger once gave a speech and at the end of it he sort of said to us, you know, really you're too well behaved. The odd riot wouldn't do any harm. And I think there is some truth in that. This is a somewhat phlegmatic country. But people can respond. Remember the huge marches over the bridges, you know, for reconciliation. Remember particularly the huge demonstrations against the Iraq war before it even began. People will respond, they will act, but we have to find ways to educate them, to alert them, the point that Sue was making. We've got to get conversations about this in every way we can. You know, we need this sort of event, and I mean politics in the pub is so good at it, but we need it replicated hundreds of thousands of times if we are to build the kind of movements that will actually stop governments supporting these corporations.
Yeah. Also, I was wondering, is there a hard copy of your speech? I found it so great. Yeah.
Oh, give me your email address before
I
you go.
don't do email. I just wondered if there was, or maybe I could get onto a website and copy.
We might be able to put that up perhaps online.
It was fantastic.
I mean, I've got it here, but I wrote some notes on what Sue was saying on the back of them, and I don't want to give those up.
Oh, no. Sure.
I'm just going to comment that I think the issue of superannuation is really, really important because there's so much money tied up in it, and most of us have super. There are super funds who don't invest in weapons, full stop, for ethical reasons, and I'm pretty sure Australian Ethical, Future Super are two of them, so look them up.
Oh yeah, I know there are some funds, but generally I think a lot of money in bank accounts and so on goes into investing, you know.
You're probably right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Jim. First of all, just jumping in with a quick announcement. Talking about wars, we've had a 200-year plus war against the Aboriginal people in this country, and on Saturday, that continues, there's a Memorial Day for John Catt. It's out at Campbelltown, Koshigawa Park. It sounds Japanese, I don't know how that comes about, but near Campbelltown Station, 11 o'clock this Saturday, 29th of September, if people want to come and support that. Yeah, so, well, I think both of the speakers gave excellent talks tonight, and what I wanted to do just quickly, there's two elements to this military spending issue, and one is this export industry that is trying to be developed, but the other one is the spending on our current military. And what worries me is that in order to justify the expansion of the existing military, they're inventing all sorts of threats, which, and the main one seems to be from China, which is supposed to be, it's not only the yellow peril coming again, but also the red peril, supposedly. And recently it's been covered in the media that they're proposing to send sections of Australian troops to Manus Island, to Papua New Guinea. We're going to go back to Papua New Guinea after World War II, and apparently to other Pacific islands in order to supposedly confront the threat from China. So I'm extremely worried that we're starting to expand this, the possible threat from Asia and the possibility of mythical threat from from China that's going to be used to expand Australia's military occupation of parts of the Pacific once again. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
I wasn't aware of troops going to PNG, but yeah, that's a huge worry. I mean, we've used our troops against Aboriginal communities on trumped up reasons too. I think it's just another piece of the picture that we need to be vigilant about, and same as having US troops here in Darwin, same part of the big problem, I think. Panama Canal.
Up on Bougainville website last night, they're proposing a base at Bougainville as well. My question relates to a text I got this morning from Sonia Bennett from the Let's Not Fly Out at Badgerys Creek Western Suburbs people, who constantly bags all us inner city politicos for not getting out there. Under the Flight Class rally at Luddenham, Sunday 7th of October, 10 a.m. I'm sure if you Google No Badgerys Creek, you'll find all the details, but the defence industry is an integral part of this second airport. I was wondering if either speaker knew of any details of those proposals. Yet they're also going to put 300,000 more houses out there under the flight path and destroy the Blue Mountains tranquility. But that's my question. But very briefly, that guy that does the Late Show in place of David Letterman, Stephen Barnard or whatever his name is, 2 weeks ago had the leading world astronomer, a black American, on, where he said there's so much space junk out there in space now floating around that whenever they put up a new satellite, they have to program it to avoid thousands of bits of bolts and everything travelling at 500,000 kilometres an hour, which will destroy the satellite set up there, and it's a very difficult task, and hence he put the can on this idea of Star Wars in space that Trump's talking about, saying that the whole communication system in space with the satellites, so many bits of space junk floating around the world at the moment, that everything will collapse eventually if they have a Star Wars flight. That's his view anyway. You can look it up by going to the Late Show archives. But the other, my very quick second question, with apologies to people in the room, so Brendan Nelson came out and said, how dare people pursue the prosecution of our BC war hero, that huge giant of a man who got all the honours, but is suspected, according to the Sydney Morning Herald and other sources, of being involved in some sort of killing of civilians or war crimes in Afghanistan.
Taking hands.
You know, how dare they investigate a war hero, which is a bit of a rerun of what they said about our Vietnam vets in Vietnam, who've all been rehabilitated. I see one of the diggers every Sunday, every Thursday at the Unity Hall Hotel, and he told me last month they finally got their official medals for the mass slaughter at the Battle of Balmoral and Coral, and he's been complaining because everybody remembers Long Tan. This guy just says to me, I personally bulldozed 700 Vietnamese young people into their graves on the first night of Balmoral, you know, and he was the left machine gunist. And he's out there in the Unity Hall every day, and go and talk to him. He's a war hero now because he killed so many Vietnamese teenagers, because we've converted our soldiers, our veterans, into war heroes rather than examining what they really did and sending the blame home to the government. And they're trying to do the same thing now with this Afghanistan guy. That's my question. And
okay, thanks, Jefferson.
And I'll mention that Late Night Live interviewed Clinton Fernandes on his new book about Australian foreign policy for the last 2 years. It's called A Little Country Off the Coast of Asia. And guess who the little country is?
Thanks, Jefferson. Look, I have to say I have no knowledge of a defence link with Badgerys Creek. Do you? No, I'll follow it up. You do. Oh, right.
They've got to make a big arms industry out there.
But with the issue of the war hero who may in fact be a war criminal, well, of course they're going to protect him. The whole warrior myth, the whole Anzac thing is about heroes who fell, who sacrificed them. Nobody ever said they went overseas to kill. Nobody ever said they died in agony screaming for their mothers. Nobody ever says who they killed and how many. You know, we have a myth in this country which is deeply dishonest and deeply damaging, that our soldiers are heroes, and it's bullshit.
I mean, yes, I agree. And in essence, what Brendan Nelson was saying is that soldiers are above the law, which is highly dangerous for Australia to be heading down that road, as our government is always rabbiting on about Australia and the rule of international law. The other person whom I'll mention is Senator Jim Molan, Senator for New South Wales, who was commander at the second assault on Fallujah in Iraq in 2004, and is sitting in our Senate.
Shame.
Fallujah.
Yeah.
You say Commander Fallujah.
Hello, I'm Michael here. I was very interested in your talks. Part of the way through, a figure of speech that crept into the English language centuries ago when another people were invaded by the people a lot of us are descended from, the English. I talk of the Cromwellian invasion of Ireland, and that figure of speech is beyond the pale. It meant beyond the area the English controlled was the pale. That's where the English feared to go. And what reminded me of that was when you alluded to how Kim Beazley of the Labor Party relaxed the laws of Australia so that armaments produced here could be sold to trouble spots in the world that bore no merit to supplying arms other than to make money. And then I thought of a later date when Julia Gillard was in power and Manus Island was set up. And then how this all became a great configuration. You start wars by arming people to the hilt, and then when those same people flee their countries in desperation to countries like Australia where there's a haven, what you do, you shut them off to a Pacific Island hellhole where they can be bastardised as refugees. That's an observation. My question is this. I'm a member of the Labor Party. Can you suggest to me anything I can do between now and when Labor comes to office, which will probably be next year, given the antics of the government that are so far beyond the pale, you couldn't call them beyond the pale, the Liberal Party, what actions people like me can put up to the party to try and address this. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed. Well, where does one start? There are so many things that we would like Labor to commit to ahead of their next forming government. Whether you work through a local branch or whatever, I think asking Labor to examine this $3.8 billion that has been committed to help weapons exporters to export their wares here, I think that would be really, really good if Labor were to consider abolishing that $3.8 billion to the weapons industry. That would be one thing. Another thing which ICAN really wants Labor to commit to is to signing and ratifying the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons ban treaty. And that would be a huge advance if Labor, ahead of the next election, says we, when in government, will sign and ratify the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. There are all sorts of other issues. The issue of jobs, get them to look at the issue of jobs and not just continue this ridiculous mantra that we get good jobs out of weapons programs. All sorts of things. They're three for starters.
No, I think that would be a good way to start. The only other thing I would suggest in connection with jobs is the question of conversion. About 20 years ago, conversion was very much on the agenda, but governments and others managed to push it aside. But in fact, there is a wealth of experience now of how conversion of military production facilities can in fact create more jobs, can in fact create a different sort of milieu. It would be lovely, for example, if South Australia, instead of being the death state, with all the battleships and everything, and submarines and so forth, became the arid zone state. If they devoted the same amount of money to developing how we can sustainably protect and use the arid zones, of which South Australia has a very large amount. So conversion programs to ask people to sort of change the way they think about the military and see it as something which needs to be converted. You know, we've got it at the moment, we don't need it, it's too expensive, let's put all our energy into converting it.
Thank you very much for both presentations. I'd like to address two issues. First is, should Australia consider itself not a representative extension office of the new imperial powers in the Asia Pacific, but instead be better neighbors in the Asia Pacific that share common defense concerns? And the second question deals with people, as particularly the younger Australians who are in information technology. Given the growing militarization of the Australian economy, what protection can we give proactively to the future Edward Snowdens, Julian Assanges, and Chelsea Mannings in Australia?
If I'm honest, at the moment, I don't think we can very effectively protect people like Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. I mean, we can hide them, you know, and sort of protect them that way, but we are not going to shift the government on those people because they've done, you know, I think it was Caroline who talked about privacy, that we don't know what's happening, and people who actually tell us what's happening are unforgivable, so that they are always punished, and we don't really have much ability to protect them. With your earlier point about relationships in the Pacific, I agree entirely. If we spent money not on encouraging Indonesia and other countries to arm more, but on providing water, good water supplies, education programs, cultural exchanges, we would have a peace dividend to spend on other things, and we would have a much less tense region. Yeah, that's what we would like to see happen. It's just that when we look at a policy, I guess the thing we have to say nowadays is, whose interests is it in? And if it's in the interests of the armaments corporations, we've got a bloody difficult struggle because they are so powerful.
Just one quick comment. The thing that we really need to cooperate with our neighbours on is climate change action. Huge elephant in the room.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Nick Dean. I'm with the Merit for Peace Group and the Independent Peace for Australia Network. I think everyone in the room probably agrees that at the centre of the problem of Australia's militarism is our alliance with the United States of America. So I'd just like to remind you that IPAN, the Independent and Peace for Australia Network, has got a campaign called Give 'em the Boot, and we start this process of dismantling the alliance by kicking the Marines out of Darwin.
Yes.
If you wish to come and talk about that afterwards, please do. The other thing I want to mention, if I may, is in connection with November the 11th. Now, last year, me and some friends from the Merit for Peace Group went down to the cenotaph in Martin Place on November the 11th, and we unfurled a banner reading, "Honour the war dead by ending war."
Yes.
A very reasonable proposition, okay? Now, I got abused, of course, for doing that. I was told I was a traitor and treacherous and disgusting, and I should be ashamed of myself, and numerous other abusive remarks were thrown at me. But I'm going to do the same thing again this year, and if any of you want to join me on November the 11th at the cenotaph, I will be there with a reduced size banner that will say, "Honour the war dead by ending war."
Yes.
Okay. There's one other thing that I'd like to mention here, and this is by way of a question. For some years now, we have been sold as a pup the concept of perpetual war. It is a disgusting concept, absolutely unacceptable to any civilised human being. Perpetual war? For goodness sake! Yet we swallow it. So the question is, why? Why have we allowed ourselves to swallow such a disgusting concept as perpetual war?
Because man is essentially greedy.
No, man is not essentially greedy.
Right.
We have been duped into believing that.
Fear. I would say that the fear is used as a tool to manipulate the people.
Last question.
Now, I felt an urge to recite a quote that I'm sure everybody has heard, but I've decided not to because someone mentioned war crimes, and so therefore I will ask, what is the chance of ever sending John Howard to The Hague to stand trial?
If I'm honest, how shall I put it? He will die, he will have a state funeral, and he will never be sent to The Hague in my lifetime, certainly. Maybe in 200 years' time, when this becomes a civilised country, people will start writing books which will rewrite his history and put him where he really belongs.
Okay, I want to thank Hannah and Sue for a fantastic talk.